And I think that for patients, it's easy. So there are some people who just don't want to go to the surgery. They might have mobility issues. They might have young children. They can't get childcare. They might want to work things around their job. And so I think it really does help patients just having an app and knowing that their doctor's going to call at some point and they can just get on with their day to day and they don't have to sit in a waiting room for 3 hours. So I think it's definitely kind of here to stay.
Let's face it, burnout amongst doctors is sky high, and we're actively seeking other ways to make the most of our transferable skills beyond the usual career pathways. Welcome to Disrupting Doctors' Careers. I'm your host, Dr. Bubbers-Jones, and I'm on a mission to connect 1 million doctors across the world with the best in diverse career opportunities. Welcome to Disrupting Doctors' Careers. I am your host, Dr. Bubbers-Jones, and we are navigating the journey of alternative careers for doctors. And today we are talking about remote working as a doctor. What opportunities are there in the clinical and non-clinical capacity? And if you were listening to one of our previous podcast episodes on how to get a job in health tech, this is something you need to listen to. I talk about the 3 doors that you need to be exploring in order to get a job in health tech. Number 1, the front door, which is the most competitive and the one that everyone does, which is applying for jobs advertised. The side door, which is awesome when you're already in a company and you find other opportunities in health tech for you to grow without that much competition. And the back door, which is when you actually get referred into a company. So we're going to talk about the side door as part of this really fascinating discussion and interview with the one and only Dr. Farah Virjee, who is a GP and clinical lead at Telehealth company Livi. So thank you so much for joining us today, Farah. It's really exciting to have you in the room. I say the virtual room. But let's get started with, well, as we're talking about remote working, why did you decide to move from traditional clinical GP work to working for a telehealth company? What was the main motivating factor for you?
Absolutely. So firstly, thank you for having me, Abena. I've been a listener for many years, so it's great to kind of finally meet you virtually.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
So I was doing a variety of locum roles when I finished GP training, trying to find where I fit in, trying to find a place where I might want to call kind of my work home one day. And I did settle into a long-term role, but I did feel that I was missing some variety in my day-to-day work, and I just couldn't see myself solely seeing patients for the next kind of 30, 40 years. I'd always had a bit of an interest in other things. So at university, I intercalated in management. So I was always particularly keen on learning more about kind of managing healthcare organizations and how the money behind it works and how the structure behind it works. And I felt that was something that was missing in my role, really. So I tried to explore different opportunities. I did a certification online with Harvard in technology entrepreneurship, which I found really interesting. So kind of the tech sparked, I guess, when I actually met another GP who was working for a digital health company who was locuming at the same place as me. And she told me just about her journey and how she was predominantly non-clinical, and it just sounded really fascinating. So I looked a bit more into it, and I wanted to find out a bit more about kind of technology entrepreneurship. How do you run a health tech business? How do you get into health tech? So that kind of sparked it, really. And then I started looking up opportunities, and I came across Livi.
So I just want to jump in there because I think it's really fascinating just to hear your journey through tech, through where you are today, but also the tech entrepreneurship bit and knowing where to look to actually study that to a degree. So why Harvard, and what did it actually involve? Like, what kind of insights did it open for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So Harvard, because there were quite a few courses available online. I went for it because I looked through I watched effectively the adverts for quite a few different ones. I felt that I found the lecturers easy to understand. They actually set you homework, which I liked. I'm a bit of a geek like that. So there were things that I could do to actually engage with the course and submit and get responses on. There was a little test at the end, and it was kind of a nice 4-month thing, which I thought was suitable and I could try and fit in out around work as much as I could. It really helped kind of having a bit of time when I joined Livi to finish that off, because I had the headspace to do it compared to being in a full-time NHS role. So what I learned about, well, it took you everywhere from how to kind of find funding for these companies, what kind of factors you have to take into when setting them up. A huge component of it was actually kind of clinical risk. So learning more about, obviously there are kind of huge risks associated when you're launching new tech, when you've got lots of patients that you're seeing, you have to work within the confines of kind of restrictions based on which surgeries you're working with. So there's lots of different things that come into play, lots of governance that comes into play. And I found it really interesting just learning about all of that, as well as how to build things. So it's kind of, say you've got some capital, what do you do with it? How do you find somewhere to start? And I think all of that just kind of drew my attention. And learning more about it, I just thought, this is great. I want to find somewhere where I can go that's kind of still in that, startup phase as such, or just feels like it's still growing. And that's what I went after.
Awesome, awesome. I mean, I think that's really fascinating. And yeah, it's interesting because I see that a lot of doctors are looking to educate themselves formally in digital health in one way or another. And actually, that tech entrepreneurship kind of course actually sounds right up my street. But knowing that I've got like 1,000,000,001 things that I want to learn, it's quite difficult to go for that. But moving on to like where you're working now and remote working specifically as a GP, what would you say the main benefits are for you, considering your broad range of interests?
Absolutely. So I think not having to physically be in a practice, not having to worry about commuting, it makes a huge difference. That flexibility that you get, the time that you save, and at least at Livi, kind of the role is a bit different to when you're in an NHS surgery. So when I'm in surgery, and I still do kind of 1 day a week, where you're always bombarded with various things that are not on your list. So you'll get someone knocking on your door saying someone's just turned up to reception, can you see them? You'll always end up inevitably kind of leaving late because you didn't finish all your paperwork on time. Remote working allows you to focus on the task at hand without having all those external factors interrupting. I think you work a bit more efficiently because you get the job done, you don't have all those distractions, and you actually have the headspace to explore other things. I found that I was so much more engaged in my course when I switched to Livi. So I was probably about kind of 2 months in or so, and I just found it so much easier to actually focus on things because my head wasn't still thinking about kind of that patient who I saw at 7 p.m. I hope they're okay. And so I think having the room to do that, both mentally and kind of just cutting out things like the commute, makes a huge difference. So that work-life balance for sure is definitely a huge plus. I think there are also just flexible working opportunities. So things like digital health companies, they tend to offer quite long hours, and so they'll appreciate that some people want to work in the evening, some people want to work first thing in the morning, some people want to work around the school run, and just fitting things in is a lot easier rather than working to the confines of a surgery's opening hours
Yeah.
or what time your colleagues work, and just working around those other people. So that again, I think, is a huge plus for me as well.
Yeah, I mean, I completely echo what you're saying because I've been 100% remote working since around the pandemic, actually. So in occupational health, we do in-person and remote clinics. We can actually work from anywhere, but since the
Okay.
pandemic, it's pretty much been mostly remote, telephone and video. But I have
Wow.
to say,
Okay.
also, I've had 2 children in that time as well. And it's been great as a
Wow.
mother to be able to work from home and continue with my mothering. Well, I say mothering, but I'm not actually looking after them during the day. I have to say, it's my mother looks after my kids. But just being able to do things like seeing them during the day, have lunch with them, even breastfeeding. I've
Yeah.
been able to continue to breastfeed for both kids, and it's just being able to have the choice to be able to do that has really opened doors for me. And as you said, kind of being able to
Absolutely.
work around things but still earn money, even going back to work
Yeah.
after having a child, not having to necessarily feel like you've got to wait a long time or even too short a time. There's a lot more flexibility in being able to do that. So I completely echo what
Definitely.
you said, like, it has opened lots of opportunities. One of the downsides that a lot of
Yeah.
people do which they complain about, but raise is that you don't get to obviously physically see anyone. I have, because my husband also works remotely as well, and he
Oh wow.
feels,
Okay.
he feels again like finding space in the house to work is another thing. But
I was going to
let's
say you
be
don't step on each other's toes, do you?
exactly. But he is more of a kind of, I want to be amongst people person, in person, outside of the house. I'm very much, I can stay in my pajamas all day and work and not physically see anyone, but see loads of people online because I have a lot of calls during the day and I don't feel lonely
Yeah.
that way. But I'd love to hear from you, like, what is it like as a GP, not physically being in a room full of GPs or with patients? Like, tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah. I think initially it was an adjustment. I'm used to kind of having coffee breaks and having a chat at work and knocking on someone's door. And so it was a bit different. But I have to say, Livi does fix it quite well. So we've got, we use Teams, Microsoft Teams. And so there's community groups that are set up on there. I'm currently the wellbeing lead. And so I arrange kind of open forums where we all get together and chat once a month. But when I first joined, it was hard. I was just like, I have to converse with everybody remotely. This is really odd. Like, I can't just call someone because I don't know anyone and I have to meet all these
Hey, how are
people over chat.
you?
Yeah, exactly. But weirdly enough, it actually works. That's what I did. So, kind of, when I was looking through patients, I saw the same name come up a few times, and I thought, oh, this person's working on the same surgery as me. And I just found her on Teams, and I messaged her, and I was like, "Hi, we both work at the same place. Let's chat." And it does take a bit of courage, and it is a bit hard to do because just approaching someone, but it really is okay. And I think you get used to it after a while. So we have quite active community chats that we all talk in. We do have in-person socials, but yes, it's not the same as going in every day. It's true. But I do try and even just get out the house in my break. So I'll go for a walk in lunch just to be able to get out, see somebody. I'll go and chat to my neighbour. And it's a bit different, but it's also nice because I didn't have the freedom to do that when I was at surgery. I'd feel guilty. I'd be like, I've got so much to do. I can't just go for a walk in the middle of the day. So I think it is different, but you get used to it.
Getting out of the house and being very diligent about that is also quite difficult, I think, when you're working from home. I've certainly found that, particularly actually more recently, just having breakfast, even like having breaks in the day, actually like having my lunch and stepping away is becoming
Yeah.
increasingly harder. But the thing is, I definitely have to finish at a certain time because the kids have to go to bed. So that's the only thing that actually just gets me out away from my desk. But then the other thing I was going to talk about is the tech. So,
Yep.
because we've worked with a number of telemedicine companies, and one of the things that's really important to them when it comes to hiring doctors, either in a clinical or non-clinical capacity, is their ability to navigate tech, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I was like, but why would that ever be an issue with doctors? Because we use tech all the time. So I mean, what are your thoughts on that with regards to you, especially like, in hospitals, the tech we use isn't exactly the greatest tech, but we're still able to use it.
Yeah.
So how does
True.
how does that compare to tech in telehealth companies? Is it difficult to use? Is it easy to use? And why do doctors struggle with it? I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super easy to use. So kind of I log into a secure portal and I've got a list of patients and the next one comes up in my upcoming activities. I click open and I click start video. So it's really easy, thankfully. So we've got tech support on hand at Livi and someone sets up your computer for you and sends it to you. So I didn't even need to worry about doing any of that. And I think quite a few digital health companies do the same now. I know there are some where you have to provide your own, but there are quite a few that do set it up for you and they offer that support. Doctors do struggle, I think, particularly when someone's been stuck in their ways for a certain way. So it's kind of like, I know how to use system one and that's what I know how to use. I don't want to learn how to use EMIS, for example. But if we've got some contracts that need EMIS, then I think that switch is a bit different, but that's kind of more the medical system rather than the digital health stuff. The actual tech for digital health, I mean, it's it's going to have its problems. I think there's always going to be a crash every now and then, but they're few and far between, and there's always someone to help with it. So I think one of the great things about working at tech companies, you've got so many people who know how to fix this stuff. So if something does go wrong, it's a very short downtime, and then it's fixed again, which is great. And it just gives you, there's lots of things that you can do that just make it easier. So to set up a video call in my surgery, I have to kind of send the patient a link, wait for them to respond, and then they'll have to figure out how to allow permission for their mic
I've
and for
been
their
there. I've been
camera and
there.
all
I
this
know
stuff.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. By the time I've done all of that, pretty much I'm 5 minutes into their 10-minute appointment. So I love that you can just start a video call and the patient has the app downloaded. So they're expecting a video call. It's all allowed. The permissions are done. You just connect it straight away. And I love that. So I think there's a lot you can gain from video calls. I think photos are great, obviously, but just from seeing someone and being able to assess, are they well? Are they not? Having a conversation with them, looking at kind of simple things that you notice on observation. Do they have an increased work of breathing? Are they dehydrated? Things like that, which are much easier to see on video than camera. And I think initiating that video call is so much easy in these companies.
Yeah, and also I can imagine your admin isn't as heavy as it would have been in a traditional surgery.
I don't have any admin, which I love. So that's one of the great things. We've got a fantastic admin team who basically do it all for you. So if I want to do a referral, I'll just kind of do a one-liner and say, dear colleague, many thanks for seeing X with Y. Details in attached consultation. And then I just task it and they do it. It's great.
I love that. I love that.
So that is great.
I love that. And actually, I'm thinking in occupational health, basically most of our time is spent writing reports for managers. Okay. And I think because actually I've come across, thinking about tech and productivity at work and automation, I've come across a number of, actually, this is a business idea, but I'm just going to say it anyway, just in case anyone wants to do it, if they're listening, take away my idea, I haven't patented it yet, is to use AI and listening just for report writing for occupational health physicians or occupational health practitioners. You would make a lot of money and you would save a lot of time if you design that software. And I think that something like Otter AI is probably can do that now. So yeah, you heard it here first.
Yeah, you really can.
Yeah, just design something for occupational health and you will be rolling in it. Anyway, moving forward. Sorry, I'm on a tangent. Remote working in general for doctors. So I get a lot of requests and queries from doctors who are like, are there any other things that I can do remotely that's not necessarily clinical? What other options are there? And I say pretty much anything you can do remotely these days. But like, what kind of options can you think of when we're talking about doctors working remotely? For example, consulting is one of the areas that we work with. I know a lot. I know some companies, consulting companies that are like only remote. But I'd love to hear from you. Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know kind of there are consulting companies that are only remote.
Yeah, they packed up their office with the pandemic and they were gone. And everyone works from home across the country. And, it saves on overheads when it comes to office space and lease and all of that stuff. So it makes sense. Absolutely. And as you know, a lot of consulting takes place on site of the customers or the clients. So whether that's NHS trusts or any other companies or organizations. So do you need an office?
Yeah. So I guess in terms of opportunities for doctors that are non-clinical, I mean, I guess the most common kind of ones are lots of kind of seeing patients online for digital health companies, one-on-one. There are opportunities. So it depends. If you want to join one of those companies, you'll often find opportunities within that, which we can definitely talk about. But other things that I've seen people do. So there are some lifestyle companies that offer kind of blood tests. They need doctors to interpret the results, contribute to the medical content on there. So they often have things on their website, articles, and writing those things requires a medic, or at least kind of to oversee them. So those are some opportunities that I've seen around. Some surgeries actually offer remote shifts. So as well as seeing patients, they do just admin shifts, which I've seen pop up every now and then. So just someone to go through bloods, letters, scripts from home, things like that. I've come across report writing for insurance companies. So I think your idea will probably come in handy for those people too. but, so things like vaccine damage payment schemes, they have some work that they outsource to doctors who go through patient notes and then write a report on whether they think that patient circumstances are due to a vaccine or not. So that's an interesting opportunity. But if you did wish to kind of explore a digital health company. So, for example, when I ended up at Livi, I wanted to do some non-clinical work as well. And after being there for a couple of months, some opportunities came up, and they have kind of an audit team, they have a mentoring team, and they have a media team. And so I found all of that really exciting because it's non-clinical work that I can do for the same employer and alongside seeing patients. And so I did pursue that as well. So a lot of it was audit related work. So obviously kind of we're required to meet the same standards. We had a CQC rating, which is outstanding, which was great. And so there's lots of auditing that goes on at Livi, and lots of opportunities to get involved with that. And some people find it really interesting.
So I was going to say, I think that's a really interesting point that you've made when it comes to looking within your existing organization or your existing circle for these kind of opportunities that are non-clinical that you can do remotely. But actually that segues on to you getting the job as clinical lead at Livi.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear a bit more about that story as to, because obviously you joined Livi as a GP doing clinical work, and then this opportunity came up. So what made you want to go for it? And what was that experience like actually going through that interview process?
So what made me go for it? So by the time that job was advertised, so it's all internal, they didn't advertise it externally, and I think that's kind of still what we do. So by the time that advert came up, I had been a Livi mentor. I'd been on the audit team and I'd been on the media team, so I'd written some articles for the website and for various newspapers, and so I felt like I'd already done quite a bit of the work that may kind of come up within a lead GP role. I think what led me to pursue it was I really enjoyed the things that I did, the non-clinical work, perhaps even more than the clinical work. And I thought, I want more of this. I want it to be guaranteed, because this is all ad hoc work, and you have your mentees and you obviously see them, and that's regular. But I wanted it to be something that I can make the majority of my work. And the other thing that I found was I really enjoyed mentoring. I really enjoyed meeting kind of my colleagues and learning about their journeys and working through things with them. The role that came up was what the lead for the NHS services. And I knew that I wanted to maintain that connection and work within the NHS and be able to work across kind of different surgeries and partnerships. And that was really important to me as well. So it seemed like a good fit. I knew that the things that I had done so far I'd enjoyed. It was really easy actually, because I'd met a few of the clinical leads at the time with all the other non-clinical work that I'd done for them. I felt like we got on really well, and I think it makes a difference recruiting internally. So you know the people a bit more, you've kind of worked with them, and they know what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And the interview as such, so there were I think there were some questions linked to kind of where do you see AI fitting in the long term, and also just in terms of checking your understanding with regards to how things are run differently when it is a company, and it's different to when you're working in NHS surgery. There's also kind of the other aspects to think about, and just making sure that you're engaged with that and you're actually aware of that as well. So I had my interviews with all of the associate medical directors, so 2 separate stages, and then I got the job, so that was great.
So what kind of things did they ask
really
you?
Enjoyed it.
I was going to say, what kind of things did they ask you in your interview? So this is really interesting, because a lot of doctors like to skip over this bit. I interviewed and then I got the job. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what were you asked, and what was that actual process like for you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was a couple of years ago, so I'm trying to think back. But a lot of yeah, what do I remember is the question. So definitely kind of what makes you a good fit for this job. Why do you think that you'd be good at it, having looked at the job description? And so the job description was things like clinical governance, a lot of that, a lot of mentoring, engaging in education and performance management, what else? Also, testing AI. So, kind of every time we launch a new project or a new product, we need to test it that it works clinically before we roll it out to our GPs. And so, are you able to assess clinical risk? And it was great that I'd done a whole module on that in my technology entrepreneurship course. So I think that put me in good stead for answering those questions. There were a few with regards to kind of you're on call and somebody's called you and they've got this problem. How would you manage it? What do you think is the best solution? How do you think that working at Livi is different to working in the NHS from a business perspective? So, for example, there might be pressure to launch something because it needs to go forward. That's not something that you'd really come across in your normal day-to-day job as a GP. You're not launching new services. You're not doing all this stuff. What makes you think that you can do it? If you were to change something about Livi, what would it be? What do you feel like your focus would be if you had that freedom to do that? What makes you different? That was another question. So what makes you special? Why
And
you?
what when that particular question is interesting because that's essentially asking you what are your unique selling points. So what
Yeah.
was it that you said that you think really stood out in the interview?
So there were a few things. I think one of the key things was I'm a self-starter, so I know what I want and I try and go after it. Um, my kind of my parents didn't kind of we weren't rolling in money. We couldn't pay for in private school. I funded my own education from the age of 11 with scholarships.
Wow. Okay.
So
Wow.
I thought that was a good selling point.
Did the tech
And then,
entrepreneurship background and experience and insights, do you think that helped in any way in your...
yeah, absolutely. So kind of my next part of that was that I wasn't afraid to explore different things. So when I was at uni, I went down the management side to try and explore what's going on there. I finished GP training. I wasn't content with just sitting still and being a GP. I went to explore this, and I learned about how these companies work. And I think that was a huge plus because I got lots of questions from then on about what did you do in this course? What did they teach you?
Yeah.
And how is it helpful? And so I think that was a really good kind of selling point for me, that I'd shown initiative to explore something that I had this interest in and actually pursue it formally.
Yeah,
Which was great.
great. I mean, well done, I have to say, in getting to where you are now and being a mentor for other doctors who are growing within the organization and also influencing quite a large, impactful tech company and healthcare as it stands. So, again, going back to like the main topic of this discussion, with regards to remote working, where do you see it going for, let's say, GPs in the future? So I know that at the moment there's a bit of a battle between in-person and remote working, depending on the needs of our population. But where are we going with this at the moment, would you say? Looking 5 years or 10 years from now?
I think we're heading to a hybrid model. So I don't think that we can solely remote work because some patients just do need to be seen, and that's just how it is. There's some things that you can't manage remotely, and I think that's very much appreciated. At least at Livi, kind of, it's very much appreciated that if someone can't be managed safely remotely, it's fine. Just book them in, get them seen somewhere, and I think that for patients, it's easy. So there are some people who just don't want to go to the surgery. They might have mobility issues. They might have young children. They can't get childcare. They might want to work things around their job. And so I think it really does help patients just having an app and knowing that their doctor's going to call at some point and they can just get on with their day to day and they don't have to sit in a waiting room for 3 hours. So I think it's definitely kind of here to stay. I think there's huge advances that could be made. We've got kind of there's instant messaging options, there's kind of sharing photos with your doctor, there's kind of questions back and forth, there's medical content, there's so many other things that you can do within these companies. But I think there are some people who do prefer to be seen face to face, and there are some people who need to be seen face to face. And I think the ideal is having a bit of both. And I think even as a GP, I like having that combination. So as much as I enjoy my remote work and I enjoy my days with Livi, I also I want my one day where I just go and I see patients and I talk to them. And I think it's important to maintain those skills as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we're definitely moving towards a hybrid.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to say, I think you are highly inspiring and it's great what you've achieved so
It's very
far. And I
sweet.
really look forward to seeing where you go, because I know obviously in your organization there are other levels of seniority that you mentioned, the associate medical director roles and beyond, or other organizations that I'm sure that you can make a great impact clinically and non-clinically as well.
It's very kind of you.
What advice would you give to doctors who are exploring work on a purely remote basis moving forward?
Don't be afraid to try different things. You may not find the one that works for you straight away. You may try something and absolutely hate it, and that's fine. I've done my fair share of remote jobs that I didn't like, and I think you have to explore and don't give up. Take care of your mental health. If you're kind of looking at fully remote working, it can get isolating if you're not seeing other people. And I think perhaps thinking about maintaining even a job where you spend half a day going in to see other people and kind of meeting your colleagues, I think that's something to think about. But like you were saying, everybody's different, and some people are fine with just working remotely. But make sure that I think it's very easy for the boundaries become a bit blurred when you're working from home, and just make sure that you focus on not letting that happen. Definitely be able to have something that keeps you in check, even little things. Like I sometimes plan something in my lunch break that forces me to leave the house. So I'll say, I have to return this parcel. I need to go to the post office. I'm going to do that at 1 o'clock, and that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah,
And that way
that's
it gets you out
great.
of the house, gets you doing something else.
I have a parcel that I've been meaning to take to the post office downstairs for several weeks now. And do you know where the post office is? I live
Down the
next
road.
door to the post office.
Plan it for a lunch break,
and I've not made it. But yeah, I think that's really good to actually book that time in so that you leave the house. But anyway, thank you so much, Farah. I really, really sincerely appreciate your insights. And on behalf of the medical community, we really look forward to seeing how you thrive in your career as to whatever you want it to be as Dr. Farah Virjee, and particularly in digital health, which I'm sure you will continue making a really great impact, not only in the space, but also for patients. So thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.